Good afternoon. It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday, day 14 or 15. You see how difficult it gets to remember all these days. It's third day of Holy Week, though. We've been talking about what happened to Jesus between Palm Sunday and Good Friday. On Palm Sunday, there was that adulation and the cheering of the crowds. Then he's in the temple teaching and engaging people, and people are opposing him. On this day, on the third day, is the day of waiting, and also known as the day of service. Jesus goes to Bethany, finds himself at the house of Simon the leper, and it's at that house that a woman gives up her whole life savings in this jar of beautiful perfume, nard, and anoints him, pours it on his head. And it creates a huge commotion. Contrast that with the widow's mite, the woman who gave everything, that's all she had, that tiny little coin. Here's a woman who gives up everything that she has in a different way. Of course, the people around him are indignant. His disciples are unhappy because they say, "Wow, look, what a waste. Why waste all that just pouring it on somebody's head?" John, in his account of it, as opposed to Matthew and Mark, he says specifically that it's Judas who complains. Judas, who was the treasurer of the group, the money keeper. In all three accounts of the gospel, you contrast this sacrificial giving with the duplicity of Judas, who goes off and he goes and he negotiates this price of 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus. This is one of the inner circle, one of his friends, someone he's trusted, someone who's been with him for 3 years, who's going to sell him out to the authorities, who are plotting to kill him but don't want to do it during the feast because they don't want a commotion. They don't want to get into trouble with the authorities, either with the Roman authorities. So there's a lot of negotiating that goes on. I wonder what Jesus felt having this beautiful act of sacrifice. Of course, he says to the people that is an anticipation of his death, that beautiful ointment. He's already knowing that the cross is coming. He's inevitably moving towards his execution in just a few days' time. He must have been aware all the time after that there was this possibility of suddenly being betrayed by Judas. What anxiety. This is the day of waiting. Of course, in all of this, he's the servant as well. It's the day of service. Jesus comes as the suffering servant. If you read some of the passages in Isaiah, for example, Isaiah 50, there's an amazing foretelling of this one who would come and give up everything. And later on in the New Testament, you get the same thing, how he empties himself and becomes nothing for us. What are you waiting for? What are you expecting? What anxieties do you have at this time? I was reading something about anticipatory grief, about the anxious wait that we have, especially at this time around the world, where every day we're looking in the papers to see perhaps someone else has died. People overseas certainly are thinking about death a lot. They think, well, is it someone I know out of those statistics? Someone famous, someone personal? Will it happen to someone in my family? There's the sense of dread. And we have it too, being in lockdown, we're kind of waiting as well, not knowing what the future will hold. We find ourselves on edge for some reason. We don't know. There's a high level of anxiety and stress. We find ourselves getting angry over things that we normally wouldn't. We don't really know why. We're just not quite sure. And sometimes we expect the worst. We have that level of anxiety. And sometimes we cope by withdrawing and wanting to be on our own. And sometimes we feel absolutely exhausted, just not knowing what we can do. What do we do with all of those feelings? Well, look after ourselves, make sure we eat and drink and rest and sleep and talk about it, perhaps keep a journal, or even go online and talk to someone who can help you to get help with the sense of anticipatory grief and anxious thoughts that pervade, that press in on your life. Jesus would have had that kind of anxiety too, and it builds up to a tension when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, which we'll come to tomorrow. Jesus is the Son of Man who comes not to be served, but to serve. and to give his life as a ransom for many. On the day of waiting, it's the suffering servant preparing himself for his destiny. And those two contrasts are always there. Someone who gives everything and someone who wants to make money out of the situation, like Judas. Jesus, the suffering servant, comes for all the people who have needs as well. The hungry, the refugees, the homeless, the weak, the vulnerable, the incapacitated, the handicapped, the mentally afflicted, the depressed, the delinquents, the alcoholics, the prisoners, the aged, the lonely, the unloved, those who have failed and fallen, and those without hope, those who need desperate help. It's to those that we think of tonight. Perhaps in your anxiety, think of others who are worse off than you. Think of those who in this lockdown have no contact. Think of people who are perhaps blind or deaf, whose carers can't get to them, who don't have the support that we have. They don't have the capacity to engage what's going on because of their particular needs. Think especially of those in hospital and those in intensive care and their families and loved ones. As we wait, going towards Easter, we're also waiting for a resolution of this whole process. How long will we be stuck like this? As I say to people, when I ask them about their children, I say, how's the incarceration going? You know, the sense of feeling trapped at home. Well, don't be anxious, be at peace. And all these talks that we've had the sense of knowing that God is with us and that he promises not to forsake us or to leave us. As we wait, think of Jesus waiting to see what would happen, waiting to see when he'd be betrayed. And tomorrow, when we look at Maundy Thursday, when he washes their feet, we'll take the story further. God bless you. Have a peaceful evening if you're in New Zealand. For those waking up in other parts of the world, may you know the peace of God. May you not find anxiety overtaking you and debilitating you and exhausting you. To take care, look after yourselves, and if you need to, get some help. God bless you and have a lovely evening.